I'm just not going to filter myself, and we're gonna see how it works. One thing that I know since I've been a kid is that I have this natural want to love. I just love people, I love life. It's a beautiful thing. I have no words for it. It's like the resilience and the miraculousness of what it means to exist on this planet. My brain can't stop thinking, what do I do? Have you tried this thing called meditation? Is everything that I constantly think, is it actually true? Or is it something that somebody said to me so many times that I inherited it as a part of that voice in my head, but it might not actually be, it's not who I am. It doesn't matter how much money that you have, it doesn't buy you happiness, and you can feel it. Cracks is where the light pours through. And it's like I broke apart enough that I let that light of Source, God, the universe finally go, hey, let me do the rest of the work. And I knew that it was Archangel Michael and that he was coming to visit me. What if all of this was part of the purpose that you hold? So it was a confirmation that, wait, I can actually be a spiritual space holder or work with my spiritual gifts. God is not something that's up there on a throne. It lives in everything. I really, 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 really believe that God makes no accidents. There are no accidents. Everything has a reason for it. What if there is a place where technology and spirituality get to meet in a way that it serves not just humanity, but it serves our planet? I am born to Russian parents, and something that I tell people is that, like, I'm Russian, but sometimes I feel like I'm not. And one of the reasons that is because I was born in Berlin. I was born in, and when I was 6 months old, I moved to France, which I spent 17 years of my life in the south, in nice, sunny Mediterranean France. And one of the reasons that we moved there is because, so when I think right after the USSR fell apart, my mom decided that she wanted to create a better life for her and my sister. So she moved to the US when she was like 28 or something, and my sister was 10. And so they got up and they took their entire life and they got up and they went. Met my dad there, who also got there. I don't always really know how he got there. I don't know the long story, mostly because I haven't had my father around most of my life. He passed when I was, I think, around 2. So she moved to the US and then she met him there, and he had 2 other daughters, so I have 3 sisters in total, actually, from different, like, one sister has the same mom, other 2 have same dad. And so after they moved to the US, he spent a lot of time working between there and Europe. So my mom was like, okay, well, let's move to Europe. Makes more sense to be with your father. And so, we went, and they moved to Germany. My mom got sick of the rain all the time. So we moved to France, and I was raised there for 17 years. I always tell people that even when in my own work, that I was always grew up a very, very spiritual kid. Like, I was in the know about the fact that there were energies around, and I always used to tell people that, like, I'd be the one who would be like, trees are alive, and, like, we should love each other and things like that. It was just a common part of me, and my mom always used to laugh that, like, I was in the back of the car talking to, like, people who weren't there, and it was what it was. No one said anything. And I was very, very, very lucky. Back then, we had a lot of financial wealth, courtesy of my dad, and so I grew up in a very beautiful village I spent, you know, when people ask me about my childhood, I always joke, I spent my whole life, like my whole childhood, climbing cliffs and catching crabs. That's what I used to do. Like, they'd send me home to go nap and I refused to go. Because I just wanted to be in nature, adventuring and catching stuff and exploring and hanging out with my friends who also did the same thing. It's like something that we used to do together. And then I went to school and I thought that all the kids were the way that I was. And I learned really quickly that kids can be not so nice. And I think not by any fault of their own, but mostly because probably like I had a family who were like, hey, she's this like different kind of kid and we accept it, and she sees things or experiences things and it's totally fine. Whereas not all kids had that. And so when I came into their world full of love and wanting to be friends and talking about weird things, they weren't so nice about it. And so, but I also can say that like I was quite heavily bullied, and that was really, really difficult. There's also something that I learned over time. So my father also passed when I was quite young, and there was a lot of things that happened, like financially and with paperwork and a whole bunch of things, and my mom had to deal with a lot of things. And because of like the relationship that we had together, I always felt like I learned. So part of the work that I do is I do a lot of inner child work, and the reason that I did that is realizing that like even though my mom was an absolutely amazing person, the things that she went through and not having the tools to be able to heal meant that she wasn't always able to show up to me the way that I needed her to. And so it meant that I didn't know that back then, but it meant that the love that I so desperately seeked from my own mother, I tried to seek in other ways. So even with the kids, even back then, I realized like I used to, kids would go and dare me to do things, and I would go ahead and I would do them. And some of those things like back then really embarrassed me, for example, but I just thought, okay, if I do this thing, then they'll like me, then they'll accept me into big. And yes, it was because of kids being kids, but I also realized like I was taught that sometimes in my own home as well, this feeling of like, if I achieve enough, if I extend enough, if I if I'm there, then maybe I will be able to be loved for who I actually am. Not realizing that the only reason that people and things in my life weren't able to love me that way were because they didn't have the tools. Like, it had to do with their relationship with them and not with me. But I didn't know that as a kid, right? So you keep internalizing these things and thinking that they're your fault. And on the same time, because I was very spiritual even as a kid, even though I didn't know that's what it was just who I was, I hid it for a really long time. And I used to put it away and I wouldn't talk about those things. And the problem with hiding this very natural part of who I was is that it got, like, the lights got darker and darker and darker and darker because I wasn't being me. And then I moved schools at one point as well, because I told my mom, like, I can't be there. I was very, very, very unhappy. And so we eventually moved. We moved from, we lived towards like the Cannes area of France, and then we moved closer towards Nice, and then eventually to Monaco. So I had some beautiful experiences, and there are people that I love there who still live there. But what I learned about was, so the way to describe it is actually, so I had an ex-boyfriend, and we went maybe like 5-6 years ago, I went to go take him there because I wanted to show him where I grew up, and not just there, the whole of that area, south of France, but that was one of the places because I spent a considerable amount of time there. And the moment that we got off the train, I wanted to start crying. And it wasn't because of any memories, it was because of the energy that was in that space. And I think the way that I explain it now is that, like, we talk about all the time, well, one, I don't think it's unknown that the money that lives there and makes up this whole place, because you could tell it's like money makes the place, is not always made in the most loving of means. And I think if we consider like everything carries energy, including money, you can feel that in the walls that are around you. But I also think that I understood very quickly is that, like, it doesn't matter how much money that you have, it doesn't buy you happiness, and you can feel it. The people may not say it, but the place is carrying that energy of all the ways that people try to sell and find their worth in these material things. And even when I was 13 to, I think, like 16-year-old kid, because that's the years that I spent there, I could feel it. Every time I left, I was fine. Every time I'd walk in, it was just heavy. And I didn't have the tools back then to understand what I know now, that places carry energy as well. And so, so I moved schools, and again, in middle school, there was a lot of bullying, and that was difficult. I kept trying to chase people who, that if I loved them hard enough, especially if they were broken, I would have finally earned the love that I desired. And this is the journey where that started me off to, I didn't realize this until I moved to Cyprus, that this is why it was the way that it was, but that I had learned that model of behavior, that it didn't come, it's like I was repeating a pattern that I had learned in childhood, that came with growing up, without having a father. So it was like that masculine figure was absent. So I was always chasing this like air that wasn't there, but also having somebody in my mother who was dealing with her own things that was, I feel like, unavailable to show up for me the way that I needed. So it was like beginning to realize that there was a pattern that was happening. That was a really, really painful time in my life. I think I also, like, at the same time, you know, growing, like, finally becoming a teenager, and finally becoming a teenager, and I feel like puberty only increased the innate sensitivity that I had. And there was a point, I think when I was maybe like 14 or 15, where I have a tattoo on my hand, and it was the first, so it says Pantarea, and it was the first business name that I had. But back then, when I got it for my graduation, I got it because, like, at one point I really didn't know if I was going to make it to the age of 18, because I didn't want to be here, and I punished my body in ways that I wish I hadn't, because of the pain that I had experienced. I think, so I punished my body in ways that I wish I hadn't. I have the scars to prove it. There was a point where, like, all of the pain that I had experienced, plus also realizing, being highly sensitive and realizing that it wasn't just my pain I was carrying. I was also feeling the pain that my mom was experiencing, and these people that I was loving, and other friends that I had that were also going through their own experiences. But back then I didn't realize that, and I just thought, like, I was too deep for this world and too sensitive for this world, and nobody understood me. And I just looked in the mirror and I was like, I didn't know why I was the way that I was, and the way that people continuously made me feel about myself, not being able to return the love that I like. One thing that I know since I've been a kid is that I have this natural want to love. I just love people, I love life, and it would just come out of me. And I couldn't understand it, because as hard as I tried to love other people, they were never able to return that same love back to me in the way that I had hoped for. And so I just thought at one point that something about me was innately wrong. And so I used to look in the mirror and I was like, I hated the person that I saw. And I think one of the, like, at one point after experiencing enough pain from friends and lovers and my own parent, I realized that one of the reasons that I was harming my body in the way that I was is because I thought that, like, it's funny because I don't think I've ever talked about it aloud in that way, but I used to think that, like, somehow my blood was tainted, like that there was poison living inside of me, and that if I could cut it out, it would leave. Because that's the way, I couldn't understand why people treated me that particular way, and it was very difficult. But at one point, I hit rock bottom in my own version of that, where I didn't want to be here and all of that kind of stuff. But something happened, and I had this weird moment, like that little voice inside of me that just went, what if you stop fighting? What if you, like, all of these things that you find so beautiful, like you never judge the trees or the plants, or everything is made, like, what if you are made perfectly too? So I stopped fighting, and there's a quote that I love to use because I think it's so true, is that the cracks is where the light pours through. And it's like I broke apart enough that I let that light of Source, God, the universe finally go, hey, let me do the rest of the work. And so I stopped fighting. Or I started going through the process of stopping to fight. It was a process. So as a teenager, and even now, it's I joke that it's my Aquarius self, but I have a brain that moves 1,000,000 miles a minute. I'm constantly thinking, and it's like, and I've been told over time, like, oh, like, you're really quick-witted, like someone will say something and I have an answer. And it's not because I'm just trying to say anything, like, there are sometimes, like, people speak for the sake of speaking, but it's more just like my brain thinks fast. So it's like I have an answer, I have a witty comeback, something like that. And I think it's the writer in me as well, maybe, I'm not sure. But as a teenager, it also was, that's when I started to learn that my brain is both my greatest asset, but it's also my most difficult burden. Because if I don't, there's again that saying that, like, the ego is a terrible master but a wonderful servant, and I hadn't learned that just yet. And in parallel, my mom was also beginning to go on her, well, she had already been on her healing journey for a little while. She'd gone, like, to go see a Chinese medicine woman, and she started yoga, and so she was also going on her own journey. But I came to her and I was like, Mom, my brain can't stop thinking. What do I do? And she was like, have you tried this thing called meditation? And so at 15, I was like, okay, we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna start meditating. So it started like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. But what happened was, it wasn't just meditation. It was like all of those gifts that I knew that I had for so long just went. And I started receiving messages, and people were delivering like, they were like, oh yeah, I had a dream about X, Y, and Z, and I knew exactly what it was about because these energies were starting to channel towards me, and I was like, okay, I'm like, this is leading somewhere. And it was a ongoing journey, very much so. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I started meditating and everything was up from there. There was, like, I think it was, the way that I explain is that part of my life started in two ways. Like, the first was, I need to manage my brain. I need to stop thinking this much. And the other thing was like, how do I stop hating the person that's standing in the mirror? And that's how the journey started. It was a self-love journey, and I wanted peace in my mind kind of journey. But what meditation often does for us is realizing like, okay, if I can slow down those thoughts enough, you begin to realize, you create enough spaciousness where you go, but who is this person that's thinking these thoughts? And where did these thoughts even come from? Who gave me these? Like, is everything that I constantly think, is it actually true? Or is it something that somebody said to me so many times that I inherited it as a part of that voice in my head, but it might not actually be, it's not who I am. And so this started to pull apart. Even though the relationships weren't perfect, there were people who came into my life, boyfriends back then who started to, like, as I started to shift, what I was receiving started to shift, and they were, I was learning about loads of very interesting things. Love my mom, but very Slavic in her nature. It was like, yeah, go get a real job. That's not a job. I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, go and be an English literature major. It was between the US and the UK. I ended up getting a scholarship for the US. I was supposed to go to university, and I was supposed to be an English literature major. We were ready to go. We graduated, we left early, we flew to Moscow, and I went to the US Embassy. I gave them everything. I got my visa, like, everything was ready to go. Except the one thing was that my mom was like, because I had gotten a partial scholarship, she was like, I love you, but I can't find the other part of the money to go. Give me until January and we'll figure it out. So she was like, okay, your sister lives in Cyprus. Let's move in with her. So we did. In September, it will be about 8 years ago. And I landed on this island that I thought I was going to be here temporarily, and I was adamant that I was going to university in the United States, and I was really, really sure about it. And then January came along, and still things didn't work out. And so I, at one point, had to accept, like, okay, I think we're going to be here. We're going to see what's happening. So I was here for about 10 months, and it was hard. I was here on this island. All of my friends were going to university, were getting ready to go to university, and I was like, I'm on this island. I don't know. Everything is kind of backwards here compared to Europe. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. Any of that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of good moments in traveling with family. And then there were moments where I was like cursing that energy, going like, why am I being punished? Like, why am I here? I don't understand why the hell I'm here. I'm like, I have this plan. And then, so after 10 months of like, also trying to make friends, but kind of struggling because I literally don't know anybody here but my mom and my sister and like a few relatives. I had this moment where I woke up one morning on like the 10th month and one day or whatever, and I cried my eyes out, and I was like, I don't know why I'm here again. And I stopped, and I literally out loud kind of looking up at the sky, just went, I don't know why I'm here, but up to this point, you have never failed me. If I'm supposed to be here for a reason, I'm done fighting and I'm gonna trust you. Within 4 hours, my sister calls me and she goes, by the way, there's an internship available at my company. Do you want to come for an interview? And I was like, okay. It's funny because you get an invitation by the universe, and then the next part of the journey really begins. And so I started my internship and I got placed in the digital marketing team. And my then boss, he sits me down and he's like, look, he's like, I love your sister and she's wonderful and you're a wonderful girl, but if you don't get your shit together, I'm gonna have to fire you. And I don't know whether it was the Slavic blood in me, but I was like, no one is gonna fire me. No one. And all of a sudden I like mustered up all of this courage. And within the end of the next month, I will never forget when he turned around to the entire department and he's like, you see how Nina's been working? This is how everyone needs to work. And I was like, okay, cool. And so 6 years of having worked there, in 6 years, I think I was promoted 7 times, which is pretty cool. So in parallel to this, so I met through my best friend, we went out one night and I met a person. And that person was like, you know, we were talking about the fact that I meditate and blah, blah. And he was like, oh, you know, I go to this place where they do meditation and they drink hot chocolate. And I was like, I know meditation. Hot chocolate? What's this thing? And he's like, yeah, it's like cacao and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you just have to, you have to meet Angela, you'll experience it yourself. And I walk through the doors of this magical woman's space. And there's this woman with wild hair in her yoga pants, like making this huge pot of cacao that's like about to like serve like 20 people or whatever. And my journey changed, completely changed. I spent a lot of time at Angela's place, probably around, is it 5 years, almost 5 years. I would be there probably at least once a week for about 5 years. A lot of different things happened there. So when I was back home and I started my spiritual journey, a lot of my journey was about being up there. So it was about connecting to other beings and the stars and like channeling a lot of energy and remembering my spiritual body and things like that. Whereas through the power of Angela Space and cacao, I started to go downwards. I started to realize that we can't fully stand in our light without doing what we call the shadow work. So looking at all of the places that we hide, that we deny, the pain that we suppress. And so this is where this work with this very small, innocent part of me, all of the things that she experienced that other people weren't able to hold her through, I would have to learn how to hold myself through those things. And that's the power of one of the things that cacao does, is that it holds such a high frequency of love that anything that's not love starts to come up and unstick so that it can be looked at with that compassion and love and all of that. And there was one particular day where I was in a really, really deep meditation, really deep. And it was almost as if I was falling asleep. And it was like everything was black around me, but I could feel this really light tint of dark blue. Like I could just see it in the blackness. And I knew that it was Archangel Michael and that he was coming to visit me. And so when I got out of this meditation, even though all I could feel was this blue color and this really deep sensation that I was going somewhere, I had another friend appear to me from the circle afterwards. And she was like, I don't know what you were doing, but the entire time there were angels swirling around you, and they want to work with you. They want you to channel their energy. And that was the beginning of me opening up. So I got my Reiki certification and I started working. I don't work with Usai Reiki, I work with Angelic Reiki, and I started working with the power of the angels. And that was the beginning where I realized, so this woman that I sat in front of me that lived in her purpose and made a living doing this thing that she loved and being like a spiritual space holder, that was the first time where spirit showed me, this spiritual journey that you've been so busy cultivating, this natural way that you consult people and that you know how to address people's problems and these sensitivities that you feel. What if all of this was part of the purpose that you hold? A confirmation that, wait, I can actually be a spiritual space holder or work with my spiritual gifts. And there were many things that after led me, crystals and tarot, and realizing that one of the ways that I consider myself a diviner, which means I see messages through spirit, from spirit, through, like, I get omens. And that's exactly what tarot is. It's like pieces of imagery and on all of those. And it can be animals that come visit me, or certain crystals that I pick up that I then realize, wait, this holds exactly the energy regarding to what I'm going through right now. It could be the people that I meet, like I could meet zodiacs, the same zodiac over and over again, and I'm like, wait, spirit is trying to send me a message. There's something I have to learn that I need to pay attention to. And so fast forward through all of these culmination of things, I have recently, not that long ago, moved to another company, and I'm now a product analyst because over time, my whole life, I felt this beauty of falling in love with making great products, and also realizing that all of these things about like how businesses worked helped me to be able to structure how I get to hold my own business, but also at the same time realizing like that even amongst the mundane world, I was constantly in spiritual school. I was constantly being educated. How do I hold my energy? How do I hold the wisdom that I know even when the people that walk around me are completely asleep to it? And at the same time growing in serving in tarot, and then eventually going down my priestessing path and holding circles and ceremonies, and somehow realizing that both of those worlds kind of make up who I am. And even though so right now where we've come to, the point that I am in my life is, for a really long time I used to separate those worlds. I thought there's the Nina that works in, that works in technology and is the marketeer and makes great products, and then there's the spiritual side of Nina, and they have nothing to do with each other. And then and it's funny because we have this right now, and especially in humanity, we have this ongoing war between technology is the way, and then there's the people who are like, refute technology, we need to go back to the ways of the land. And I have come to this point where I really, 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 really believe that God makes no accidents. There are no accidents. Everything has a reason for it. So it's funny how these opposing worlds have come to me, and sometimes I'm like, what if there is a place where technology and spirituality get to meet in a way that it serves not just humanity, but it serves our planet? And so I don't know what all the answers are, but I do know that that's currently the question that Spirit is asking me to explore. And that, both of those worlds aren't so different as people might make them out to be. And so that's where we're at.
What does it mean?
So really being a priestess kind of leads me, it's linked to being a witch, because it's part of very many of the same things, but as opposed to just being a witch and holding that practice just for myself, priestess allows me to serve my community. It allows me to, it's like I am the hand that holds people to remember their own connection to the divine. I open that channel up for people.
Healer. How do you understand being a healer, and what do you do to heal?
To heal. So, so something that we already talked about is this concept of realizing that one of the greatest discoveries that I found is realizing that we are not innately broken in any shape, way or form. That we are perfect in our own way, and we're being led back to that. And so being a healer is me helping other people to discover the same part of that. And I think one of the first thing about discovering about being a healer is realizing that it starts with self first. And so what I do is that I'm not more special than anybody else. I'm not like the chosen one, and I don't believe any healer really is. What we're doing is that we're reminding other people that they are here to be able to hold and to heal and to discover themselves. They are the healers of their own life. And sometimes it's like, even with the priestessing, it's like I'm the hand there to hold you across the bridge until you're ready to hold yourself.
How do you understand love?
Oh, okay, that's a huge question. And mostly because if you go on my little Instagram page or anything like my little socials, the first thing that I say is that what I am is in service to love. And not love with a small L, love with a capital L. And that's like every circle that I start with, I always start with this idea of I'm many things. I'm a priestess, I'm a tarot reader, a product analyst, a daughter, but above every role that I play, I'm in service to that energy. And I really think so yes, there is romantic love, and there's love that you have between your friends, but if I'm gonna when people ask me what do you believe is God or the universe, or I don't think it's a man in the sky, I think it's an energy. And the only way that I can describe the beauty of that energy in its highest form is love. And it makes everything, from the sun to the trees to the chair to everything is imbued with that energy. We just sometimes forget that it's there. And I think as a highly sensitive person, the first thing that I learned about myself is that there is so much love inside of me. It's something that I can't lose, because it's what I am. I'm created from that source. We all are. That's at least my belief of it. And the only job that I have in this life is to remove all of the barriers and the blockages and the limitations and the ideas that stop that love from flowing. Things like, even when I'm in my darkest moment, there is love there. Every time we go through a heartbreak, we actually, in my belief, we allow more love to take place. And the reason that I say that is because, for example, when you go to the gym, right, what you're doing every time is that you step in and you're breaking your muscles so that more tissue can grow in place. The heart, whether that's energetically or physically, is also a muscle. So for more love to be able to take its place, or it's not that take its place, but to reveal itself, it needs to be able to break open, right? Because also love, love is our inherent nature, but also compassion, which is part of that love. One of my teachers taught me this, and I also, like, I've seen it every time I go through one of those heartbreaks, is realizing that compassion comes from endurance. I understand other human beings because I've been down that rabbit hole as well, and it gives us color and life, and so there is love in those moments. I'm being made into something. Even though I don't always like how that feels, it doesn't mean that it's not love. The way that I see that energy of love or the universe or whatever is that it's literally in anything. God is not something that's up there on a throne. It lives in everything. It's part of nature. I have a big love towards the ancient traditions, mostly because they understood that, like, he, she, the thing lives in the land, and I think nature is constantly reminding us, like, every lesson that we need really about what it means to expand as a human, to find strength as a human, lives in nature. From the fact, like, constantly something that I'm reminded that everything doesn't bloom all year round, which is why do we attempt to, and that's actually, funnily enough, when you ask me about this question of, like, how did I know the feminine, was guiding me, or that this was part of my work, nature led me here, because there is a time for growing and pushing through the cracks, and then there's a time for shedding and dying, and I perceive her as a she's constantly teaching me that, and that's probably one of the biggest inspirations. People, I love watching people's, that is part of my work, is when other people tell people that no, you can't do that, I say yes. I love watching people's joys, their passions, their dreams, their creations coming into being, people's stories. Everyone is so unique. Everyone has been through something and has loved and has lost and has passions and potential, and it's amazing to watch. I really believe that life is something to be devoured, and that there's always, like, a gift being presented to you. Like, when you really understand, like, sometimes I have to remind, like, even colleagues at work that, like, guys, we're on a ball of dirt, like, that's orbiting a ball of fire in the middle of space. Like, if that's not miraculous, what the hell is? And we're busy, like, I don't know, mad at someone for this, or, like, I don't know, holding a grudge against that, or worried about the fact that, I don't know, the plumber didn't show up on time or something like that. And I'm like, guys, do you see it? So this, like,
why people do not see this?
Why do people not see this? I think programming. We've been guided away from it.
By whom?
Sometimes I think there's certain people, right? I wouldn't really consider I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist, but I also do know that there are people who benefit from people, like, when you realize the miracle that you're a part of, you realize that there's sort of, like, nature has an inherent harmony to it. And when you notice that, you also notice the way you can feel it in your body that we're out of a state of harmony. And there are people who if more people were aware of that, you would have to awaken to the fact that there's something I have to do to change. And there are people who benefit from people not realizing that or not knowing that, and also there's also in some cases, like, I'm I am also aware that I'm very privileged. I am aware that I'm not like yes, in many ways there's certain things that have happened in my life which put me into like survivor's mode. I've gone through hard things like many of us have, but I have a roof over my head. I don't have to worry about where I'm getting my food. And it means that there are people who don't get to ask those kinds of questions because their focus is elsewhere, and that's fine. But then there's also, I don't know, there's also the people who have everything and they still don't notice the miracle that they're part of. Many of us have become disconnected.
Whom would you thank for being privileged, for having everything that you have right now?
Who do I thank?
Yeah, I mean, for your roof, for your food, for everything that you have in this material world, at least. Who is responsible for this?
There are so many people. There are so many people. Like so one of the things that I talk about in my work, but it's also a belief system that I have, is I don't believe in the term being self-made. I don't think it exists. Why? I mean, yes, there is yes, there are people like they need to muster up the courage to be able to take themselves to where they need to go. But every single person had at least one person that told them, yes, you're capable. Whether that was a coach or a teacher or a next door neighbor, there's always someone. So you've never done anything completely isolated on your own. It doesn't exist because humans are a social species. We need encouragement, right? So there's loads of people. I think for one, no matter the trials and tribulations that we've been with as a family, my mom, my sister, yeah, so they just let me be that person, and that brings me a lot of gratitude. I probably wouldn't have started meditation without my mom's suggestion when I was about 15 years old, so there's that.
The first one is your mother.
Yeah, probably my mom. Yeah, definitely. She's I think like all families, she's the things were not perfect, and she gave me a lot of good things, and there was also a lot of challenges, and those challenges led to those good things, right? It's like the things that I had to overcome is part of the reason why I serve the way that I do, because I never ever want to allow anyone to experience some of the things that I had to, and it's of nobody's fault. But yeah, so my mom, but there's a lot of people from teachers to bosses to those people who saw sometimes things that I couldn't see. And also I have to apart from people, I think I need to give grace to myself, because it's like I kind of believe that humans come like little prepackaged seedlings, right? So the tomato seed will always grow into a tomato plant. It doesn't need to know how to do that. It just needs the right environment. And so it's like whatever was in me was always in that seedling. I just needed the right people to go, yeah, go this way, do that way, say this, do that, or have you thought of this? And then they gave me the environment to be able to grow into what it was that I was who I'm ongoingly finding out I'm supposed to be.
Why do people need to evolve spiritually?
I don't think I have all the answers for that. I think evolution is just our natural process. Everything in nature, everything that we do, we're naturally evolving. And I think the whole thing with us remembering our spiritual nature is realizing that when you remember that things are alive, you treat them with reverence. And you realize that I'm connected to the life and things around me, so they deserve my respect. I think one of the deepest things about being a spiritual human is realizing that I'm a guest on this planet. It's not mine. It lets me live here. So evolving in my spiritual nature remembers that every time I make a move, I make a choice, I have an impact. Not just on this planet, but on every human being and every living thing around me. And me evolving as a spiritual being and being able to tap into that love really allows me to understand the power of being interconnected. And I think also it's like evolving in spirituality, you realize that one of the reasons that we went to the chapel that we did, and why I have so much appreciation for this really small place, is because in a moment where I get like really beautifully human, and I want all the things, and I want to do all this stuff, and I realize that in my very nature, I'm very, very simple. I want to be loved, and I want to love. And that all of the things that I receive mean nothing without the people that get to witness the things that I have created. And I think that's why it's important, because it reminds us of that. And it also reminds us that we don't have to do everything alone. Right? By the power of our own will, there's some magic and mystery unfolding, bringing the right people together and places together, and it just makes life more magical and beautiful. And you get to learn, right? At the end of the day, Earth, like, I think we expect being here easy, and I don't think so. I don't think it's simple, but it's not always easy, because we're here to learn and to grow and become, be on this journey of whatever this life gets to feel and taste like. And I don't think you can do it if you don't remember that you're connected to everything.
If the whole world would listen to you right now, what would you say to people?
Be honest. And I don't mean honest about like I need to come to someone and be like, let me tell you what I think of you. I don't mean this. I mean something that we talked about off camera is that we walk around as human beings hiding the fact that we're human, and then we wonder why we don't see each other and why we feel disconnected. But the truth is that when you feel awkward, life would be so much easier if you just said it. When you care and you love someone, say it. Because life is is ridiculously short in the fact that we have no say over when it ends. And the stuff is awesome. Great, you might buy beautiful cars and go to beautiful places, but you will regret not telling the person that you love that you love them. And part of being honest is also being honest about who you are. Loving what you love, following the dream that you actually have, because I think we get so much better at loving other people when we actually honor the truth that is inside of us. By listening to that whisper of this is who I actually am and this is what actually gives me joy, we end up filling up our cup, and we can only really serve and love people from that place. So I think just be honest. Be honest. And I think the one other thing that I'm going to add is that, and it's something that I tell people all of the time, people are afraid to love and say that frequently, and because people hurt people and that kind of stuff. But one thing that I know is that we spend so much of our life walking around like this, right? First pretending to not feel what we feel and be who we are and that we haven't experienced pain, but also fighting against pain. But we don't realize that every time I don't take the risk to love, I also miss out on the other side, which is the incredible amount of joy. And one of the things that I constantly tell my clients and people is that I have no interest in being good. I want to be whole. And the whole part of being whole is realizing that being human means that there's incredible joy and that there's incredible grief. And when I turn over to the bucket to live a full life, I have to realize that there are rainbows, but those rainbows also come with rain. But I know that when I get to the end of my life, I loved and I loved well. And that was so much more worth it, even with all the heartbreak, than having lived a life where I kept my heart guarded, but I only felt a minuscule of what was possible to experience in this life. So I think it's those three things. Be honest, be who you are, and don't be afraid to love, because it's all part of the process.